What makes this interesting and makes this challenging is that 80% of the stuff is not found in any database in your organization. It exists on file shares, maybe on a SAN, on people's PCs, whatever the case may be, but it's not in a database that you can manage. Getting this stuff in the database prior to SQL Server 2012 was very, very hard to do. It made management of this data hard. It was very difficult to integrate. If you come from an application developer background, you've undoubtedly had to deal with this, whether you're managing images or documents or whatever the case may be. So the key objective for this presentation is to show you that SQL Server 2012 is not only a great choice for integrating this data into your enterprise, but it also makes managing this structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data very, very easy. And I've got multiple demos that hopefully you'll be able to take away and be able to play with to demonstrate that. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Filestream. So Filestream is not new to 2012, and some of you may have worked with it, may have been either fortunate or unfortunate enough to have worked with Filestream when it first came out in 2012. This was the first pass where the database engine was actually integrated with the NTFS file system. The way this worked is it actually used a var binary max column to store data, but it was actually stored on the file system. This was not trivial to a trivial thing to work with. It did have a dual programming model, meaning that you had two ways you could interact with Filestream. You could use Transact SQL, but you couldn't actually write data to the Filestream via Transact SQL. You basically could read it via Transact SQL. If you were actually going to write data, you actually had to write Win32 streaming code. This was, again, non-trivial because it required a transactional context in order to do this. So this wasn't like writing a text file to your file system if you're familiar with programming, and it can be done in 2 or 3 lines of code. This was something that was fairly complicated and took some doing to get done. From Filestream, or the basis of Filestream, is what allows this new feature that's called FileTable to work. And you may have heard of FileTable, but what FileTable is it's brand new in 2012. It gives us a Win32 API access over Filestream. It's a brand new type of table. It is a fixed format table. It uses Filestream as the storage container, and it's the table, which we'll see here shortly in the demo, actually has columns for all the file system properties. It uses a hierarchy ID to basically synthesize the hierarchy that's found in a file system. So what you wind up with is I can open up Windows Explorer and I can browse to the file system, and it looks like I'm dealing with files on the file system, but I'm actually dealing with SQL Server, a table in SQL Server database. So it makes it very, very easy to interact with. So when we create a file table, we can access that table through a file system share or via a table in the SQL Server database. The SMB protocol allows remote access to this file system share. So we can do things like open up a doc or open up a Word doc directly from the file share. We can edit it, update it, delete it, do whatever, and it's going to affect that file table in SQL Server. These shares do not require transactional context, so we can basically allow non-transactional access, which is what makes this so powerful and easy to work with. Now, there is one constraint. Notepad and Paint are two applications that handle files in a special way, and it's called memory mapped files. You cannot open a file from a file table in either Notepad or Paint, and I'll demo that for you to show you how that breaks down. That's not a big deal, but if you're demoing it and playing with it, you try and pop open a text file, and you'll see the error you get. It just prevents you from loading these memory mapped files via this file system share that's created for FileTable. The nice thing about FileTable is it takes care of preserving all the file name and properties for you. There's no work that you have to do. It also supports directory structures, so we can actually create an entire directory structure within the FileTable, and it will preserve all that for us without us having to do any different work. I've got this, I just took this straight from MSDN. This is the table when you create a file table that's created. Now you can't add or remove columns from this. When you create this table, this is what you get. And if you look at a lot of these columns, a lot of these look like properties of a file that exists on a file system. So if you were to right click and go into properties and view details, you would see a lot of these same things within that details window. And that's exactly what's being stored in SQL Server for you. So to create a file table, we have to do a couple things. Again, FileTable is built on Filestream, so the first and most obvious thing that you have to do is you have to enable Filestream. Once we enable Filestream, we have to create a database, and we have to tell that database that it contains a file stream. The other thing that we need to do is we have to make sure that we set non-transacted access to full, and we give it this directory name. And this directory name is going to be important because that's how that's going to be propagated up to our share that is going to be published. And we'll see what that share looks like in the next slide. Once we create that database, we're actually going to create a table, and we're going to tell it that we're going to use FileTable. Now, notice the other thing we give here. We've given it a directory name here called Tech Papers, and we're going to give it a FileTable directory name here called Document Library. So we're creating a path that's going to be used to create that share once this table is created. So this is what the share looks like once we create it. We have the server name, so when we set up our server, we get the server name, the instance, database, and table. So this is the form that our shares take. Now, FileTable you can actually interact with both via Transact SQL as well as working with just directly with the file system or the Win32 file system. In the FileTable, you can do inserts, updates, and deletes.